Okay, my name is Asako. My daughter Hanna was diagnosed with PDD in August 2007. She was already 4 years and 8 months at the time. She developed fine until I would say the age 3.5. She was in a typical preschool with her twin. She was speaking and she was asking questions, identifying shapes and colors and some numbers and letters, and just doing fine. She was playing with her sister, and she had a friend. They had play days. I didn't have to supervise them. They just played, doing whatever upstairs, downstairs. They were together. They were playing. We don't know what happened, but sometime between the age 3.5 and 4, she kind of slowed down in her development, especially her language. Her vocabulary was not adding. She was still asking questions. She was still having conversation with us, but just, her speech development was slowed down. And after her 4th birthday, she was not playing as much as, playing with toys appropriately, or playing with her friend, playing with her sister as much as she did. She was sitting in the corner, rubbing and scratching toys and books. And then sometime between 4 years old and 4.5, she had 3 courses of antibiotics, and that's when we saw her going downhill. She was stimming. At the time, I didn't know what was happening, but she was pinching herself, touching her mouth all day, and saying the same thing over and over and over, and toe walking, and she just didn't want to play with her sister anymore. She was crying all day. And so she was diagnosed in the summer of 2007, and I immediately I did tons of research, and I immediately found out about the diet and supplements, and also Dr. Neubrander. So we made an appointment with Dr. Neubrander, and that was October, the first appointment. So we had some time between the time and the time that I made an appointment, and then the actual appointment was about 2 months later. So we did the diet and supplements, and we saw some nice gain. Her attention was better, her stimming was decreased, and she was playing with her sister a little bit. So we saw some nice improvements, but her speech continued to decline. She was losing her words every day. She was having real difficulty retrieving words and phrases. She wanted to say something like, "Give me." She couldn't say that. She would say, "Read it, please." I'm finished. I don't want it anymore. Things that she used to say, no problem, she couldn't say anymore, and she would retrieve some wrong words. So the speech continued to decline. And we started MB12 shots with Dr. Neubrander's protocol in October. And within a week or so, we saw her speech coming back. Her spontaneous speech was there again. And it wasn't just about her wants and needs. She would say, when I was rinsing my mouth in the bathroom, she would say, "Spit." And she saw a dog and she said, "Doggy." I was knocking on the door, she said, "Knock, knock." So that was really great. And more words were coming. But for some reason, by the end of the first cycle, which I think was 5 weeks, for some reason, the effect subsided, and she was quieter again, and she was crying. She's crying. She seemed to be really ill. And we had the follow-up appointment with Dr. Neubrander, and he put her on the biofilm protocol, and that worked. In the beginning, she had some die-off reaction, but after that, she was happier. She was talking more. So she was improving again, but it wasn't as significant as the effect that we saw with the MB12 shots. It was slow and steady improvement. But she was doing, she was learning, and she was doing better and better. We started the hyperbaric chamber, soft chamber, in February 2008. And that's when we saw, again, a significant effect. After the first 30-day cycle, one day she had the home ABA therapy. After the session, the therapist came upstairs and said, "You know what your daughter did today?" And she told me what Hanna did. At that time, she was learning color blue. When she was diagnosed with PDD, she lost the skills to expressively identify colors and shapes and letters and numbers. She didn't know any of them anymore. So the therapist started with color blue, and I think the shape was square. The first shape was square. So she was working on those for several weeks. And she learned blue, but she said blue to all the colors. When I showed different colors, she said blue. So I asked the therapist to introduce another color so she knows colors are different. So she was working on, I think, 2 colors or something, and inconsistently identifying those colors. But on that particular day, she expressively identified blue and green and red. And the shapes she identified expressively: square, circle, triangle, rectangle. So the therapist was really amazed, and she just showed her heart and star just to know, if she can say it. She said heart and star, no problem. And also, she was tracing her name in all capital letters, Hanna. Those are all straight lines. She was doing the same thing for weeks, for a few weeks. On that particular day, she brought a homework from school that was tracing the letter S. So the therapist helped her trace the S. And because Hanna seemed to be moving her wrist by herself, the therapist said, "Hanna, why don't you write S here?" And she wrote it, no problem. And she said, "Write it again." She wrote it, no problem. So she did some amazing things on that particular day. And the therapist was like, "What's happening? What did you do?" And I told her, she knew all the shapes and colors before. She must have remembered all of them all of a sudden. So since then, she goes to the soft chamber every other month, and we also started a heart chamber. Lately, we started an intensive heart chamber therapy because this one very interesting thing happened during the HBOT sessions. About 2 years ago, we stopped speaking to Hanna in Japanese. When they were babies, when the twins were babies, we spoke in Japanese all the time. But about 2 years ago, we decided to speak in English exclusively so that she learns English without confusion. So she hasn't spoken in Japanese. She speaks only English now. So she hasn't spoken in Japanese for 2 years. Every time she goes into the chamber, she remembers Japanese words or phrases that she hasn't said for 2 years, or 1.5 or 2 years. The first time she said, "Don't cry." she had a chelation therapy after the heart chamber. And she said to herself, don't cry, in Japanese. And the second time she did the HBOT, she said, she came to her daddy. She said, play with me in Japanese. And also she said something about, what about mine, in Japanese, when her daddy was giving her twin something. Hanna said, what about mine, in Japanese. And the last session, the heart chamber, that was a heart chamber. Inside the chamber, she had bloody nose, and she said bloody nose in Japanese. So that's very interesting. Something is working in her brain, and something is helping her to remember, to recall all those words that she hasn't said for a long time. So I think that proves that HBOT is doing, some good things to your brain. So we also started heart chamber, and we've seen very nice improvements in her speech and play skills. She's playing with her sister more. She's more interested in other kids. Her eye contact is great, and joint attention, when I point, she'll just look immediately, no problem. Let's see, what else? So she's doing really, really great. She's still very behind compared to, her peers, typical peers. Her speech is very behind. And she's still in the special education class. So I wish her progress was faster, but when I think about Hanna about a year ago and 3 months ago, she was playing with the switch all day, not all day, but on and off, on and off, on and off, until I say stop. And she was toe walking, she was stimming vocally, she was saying the same phrase over and over and over and over. She was crying all day. She didn't want to play with friends. Her anxiety was really, really bad. There was one particular park she was very afraid of. Whenever I took her to the park, she cried, she screamed, tantrum. She said, I want to go home. She was very afraid of that particular park. And after we started MP12 shots, I took her to the same park. She was just happy. She was climbing up the ladders and going down the slides. No problem playing. Very happy. That was the park. She was afraid for maybe 4 or 5 months. I tried many times because I thought maybe she would get used to it. And I tried many times, me and my husband. She just didn't like it. She was crying. So finally we gave up. And then we did the MP12 shots. And I thought, maybe, I try this park. So I took her to the park, and she was just happy. So compared to, where we started, she's already a very different child. So I just hope that she continues to improve, in her speech and play skills, and then she will catch up with other kids someday. We also we've done a lot of other treatments. LDA for allergy, LDN, chelation, the glutathione cream, Actos, whatever Dr. Neubrander recommended, we've tried. She's still on many of those, and I think everything worked together. But 2 things we saw very, very significant effects were MB12 shots and hyperbaric chamber, I would say. And I think we're going to try neurofeedback in the near future.